Does that make the argument more valid when Senator Chuck Schumer and others are on Capitol Hill bringing up words like Jim Crow 2.0, disenfranchisement, 20 to 25 million people not being allowed to vote, them being compromised for their right to vote, et cetera, et cetera?
So Stephen A. Smith just took on voting rights with the kind of thorough journalism we rarely see in sports media. He's grilling experts with data-driven questions that politicians won't ask. This is why his platform matters beyond sports. Let's break down this masterclass in accountability journalism.
2 million votes and only one, showed themselves to be a non-citizen and they didn't even show up to the polls, and you present this kind of evidence?
Those numbers are devastating to the entire narrative. Out of 2 million votes examined, finding just one non-citizen who didn't even vote exposes how manufactured this crisis really is. The data completely undermines the fear-mongering we've been hearing for years.
I'm anxious to hear, what do they say to somebody the likes of you when those facts are presented to them as a party?
This is exactly the follow-up journalism we need. When politicians make sweeping claims about election integrity, they should have to defend those claims with actual evidence. Too many interviewers let vague responses slide without demanding specifics.
So that 12% that you said that wouldn't be able to easily produce documents that shows their citizenship, has it been proven that most of them are Democrats?
That question cuts straight to the political calculation. If these verification requirements disproportionately affect one party's voters, it reveals the true motivation isn't election security, it's strategic voter suppression disguised as good governance.
So if that's the case, why do you believe that the Republicans have taken this position? Are they of the mindset that illegals have voted in elections and that's something that they are determined to eradicate, or is that just propaganda?
Using the word propaganda is exactly right here. When policy proposals are based on problems that statistically don't exist, that's textbook political theater. The willingness to call it what it is separates real journalism from access journalism.
When you present this evidence to the GOP and the Republican Party, making this argument to basically refute what they're proclaiming, what do they say to you?
That persistent questioning is crucial. When politicians can't defend their positions with facts, their silence becomes the story. This kind of pressure forces them to either provide evidence or admit their arguments are politically motivated.
So that's the answer to my question, because I was asking you, what do they say to you? My question to you is, what do they say when presented this evidence as members of the GOP, considering how much they're pushing this issue?
The refusal to address hard data tells you everything. When your entire policy platform crumbles under basic fact-checking, doubling down instead of adjusting course proves this was never about election integrity in the first place.
But one could easily ask, if Donald Trump didn't make so much noise about the election being rigged in 2020, which obviously led to his ouster from the presidency back then, that none of this would be happening.
That connection is spot on. Trump's 2020 election claims created this entire infrastructure of suspicion and legislation. What started as one man's refusal to accept defeat became a nationwide assault on voting access. The causation is undeniable.
So what would be the easiest way to prove your citizenship with an ID in today's day and age in March of 2026?
Getting into implementation details exposes how unrealistic these proposals really are. Most Americans don't carry passports daily, and requiring specialized documentation creates barriers that have nothing to do with preventing fraud and everything to do with limiting participation.
Would it be going the route of the passport? Would it be them validating the driver's license situation in a different way to make it more authentic?
Those practical barriers are massive. Passports cost over $100 and take weeks to process. Enhanced licenses require multiple trips to DMV offices that many communities lack. The logistical nightmare alone would disenfranchise millions millions of legitimate voters.
How do you prevent eligible voters from being locked out?
That's the fundamental constitutional question. Any election security measure that prevents more legitimate votes than fraudulent ones violates the basic principle of democratic participation. The cure can't be worse than the disease.
What due process protections exist for someone who's wrongly flagged?
Due process is crucial here. Database errors, clerical mistakes, and identity theft could wrongly flag thousands of citizens. Without robust appeal processes and legal protections, legitimate voters get caught in bureaucratic nightmares trying to prove their citizenship.
How do you separate election integrity policy from election year politics?
The timing reveals everything. These proposals always surge during election years, then disappear when actual governance begins. If election integrity were the real concern, this work would happen consistently, not just when it's politically convenient.
Now, supporters argue this, Mr. Wild. They argue this. They say this is so much simpler than people realize. And here's their argument. Only citizens should vote. So, verification is standard in other areas of life. So what's the problem here? What's wrong with applying that standard here?
The reasonable sounding argument falls apart under scrutiny. Yes, only citizens should vote. That's already the law. But when your verification system blocks thousands of legitimate voters to catch virtually no fraud, the math doesn't support the policy.
So to make sure I'm correct, what you're saying is that the states can work in concert with one another to resolve the issue on their own without having to wait for the federal government, for Congress, for both houses of Congress to come together on this issue.
State-level cooperation makes perfect sense. Interstate compacts already work for things like driver's license recognition. Rather than federal mandates that create constitutional conflicts, voluntary state partnerships could address legitimate concerns without mass disenfranchisement.
You said 0.04%.
0.04%. That tiny fraction exposes the manufactured nature of this entire crisis. We're talking about reshaping American democracy to address a problem that affects less than 1 vote per 1,000. The response is completely disproportionate.